John Puxty, bnptv, Brussels, speaking with Nick Griffin, MEP. Nick, many nationalists across Europe and in Britain as well have been watching Golden Dawn's advance, politically speaking, in Greece recently. Are there any lessons for us from what we've seen in Greece?
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, I think it's necessary to say when you're talking about Golden Dawn, there's enormous amounts of left-wing and system propaganda against them. I think a lot of it's lies. On the other hand, in some ways, I think they may be more hardline than anything that's suitable in Western Europe. But so they're different. But what I find really interesting about Golden Dawn are two things. First of all, the fact that when they started quite some years ago, they were just a political ideas group, really. And they got absolutely nowhere trying to sell political ideas, to the extent they actually had to shut themselves down. And then they came back before the last wave of Greek elections with a totally new, different approach, which was far less talking about ideas. They are still ideological, I gather. I don't read Greek. But they're far more concentrating on actual practical things, getting in, knocking on doors, being active in local precincts, in local areas in Greece, and really working with local people. And this sort of practical applied idealism, the left may not like them, but they're in there, they're doing blood banks, they're providing legal advice to poor people. They've done a lot of stuff with food banks and food distributions in central squares when people have come in to be helped and so on. And they're pointing out, very effectively doing this, I think the key thing, that all the other politicians are the same. All the other politicians gang up against them, which is very true. We've got that, we know that. We know that works to our advantage to an extent. But on top of that, they're also saying, look, we're showing practically that we're different to all the other political parties, because while they just talk about things, the nationalists are actually doing things for people, and actions speak louder than words.
Can we in Britain do something similar to this?
Absolutely so. Not exactly the same, of course. Certain things don't apply. I don't think for 1 minute you could set up a British blood bank. Our health service just doesn't work like that. But I think particularly you take the fundamental concept of knocking doors, standing in streets, talking to people instead of thrusting something political down their throats, and proving by practical efforts that you're actually different. I think we can probably best do that by working local wards. Obviously, we're highly electorally based. Now, a number of our most advanced groups and branches around the country have, I'm very pleased, over the last few months, really started experimenting with food banks in the street. People down in East London, Essex, just the other day, advanced one on that. They had a food bank, but also a clothes bank as well. So there's a lot of interest in the party and about this, and I think a broad understanding of the fact that we need to be doing something in these fields. The one thing I think we haven't yet quite connected is the fact that really a food bank in a high street, it's great sort of getting people to talk about you and so on. I think it's probably got potential to recruit people, but to really tie this into electoral politics, you have to be, I think, door to door in the best parts of a target ward, because that's where we really need people to understand that we're different. We can't change the whole country overnight. We've got to concentrate on a few small places and break through with the concept there and watch it spread from there. It's that connecting directly to potential voters that I think is really, really important.
This sounds very good, but as you know, Nick, local politics is labour intensive. Where are we going to get the people to do this? Or does the system itself have recruitment potential, perhaps?
I think that's the point. We've got enough people to start it, but not enough people to spread it that far or fast. But I think that it's a wholly new approach for us. We're nationalists, we are idealistic, but it's been ideas and not practical things. So we've tended to recruit, therefore, people who are interested in ideas. And also, we've got to say it, that we're very critical of all the terrible things going on in society. So we can't help being negative, because we're talking about negative things. And if you talk about negativity, as we have to, talking politically, I have a pretty firm hunch that you tend to attract negative people who just want to talk about negativity, sit in pubs and whine about it, And we need to be out there, and I think when we're doing positive things with ordinary people, we'll get ordinary people helping. Example of how it works is some of the sort of the failed nationalist bigots out there that are now long departed from us. They sit and whine, the British people aren't saving, they're useless, they're lazy. What utter nonsense. You look, well, there's not a pub in Britain, there's not an area in Britain where people aren't doing things for things like Help for Heroes, or if a local kid has some terrible leukemia, cancer or whatever, everyone in the area rallies round, they do sponsored this, sponsored that, to send them to Disneyland before they die. It's all very sad, but people do that, they really do it. And that's ordinary people doing things, and that's I think that once we start doing something which is similar to that, being positive, showing different, we'll attract people like that. Having attracted them, if we work out a system which is sensible and practical, an easy thing to do in terms of door knocking, whether it's some simple training, what you do, whether it's template leaflets so that people can use those. However we do it, if we work it out right, when someone gets on board, instead of being told, oh, you've got to wait before you come to a meeting in a month's time or whatever, and they're coming to a political meeting, they're not interested in politics, instead of that, it's straight away, well, look, you can help us tomorrow. You can help us right now. Which of your neighbours needs help? What can we do? And involve them straight away. So the thing is sort of automatically, I think, self-motivating for decent people. They're automatically self-trained because it'll be such a simple system. We're not talking anything complicated here. Knocking on a neighbour's door, asking how you can help is the simplest thing in the world. So I think because of that, it'll spread quite quickly, and we can sink very rapidly. If we simply try it, I believe that we'll rapidly sink deep roots in our target communities.
The power of this is obvious, and we can see it working in Greece today. But is this an alternative path to the old electoral road?
No, this obviously people might say, well, they used to do elections, now they do this. But no, I think this feeds absolutely into elections. It's completely complementary. We know, from just a little aside for a moment, we know that what we can call the Maryport system, intensive voter registration, intensive work to get our supporters to get postal votes and working to turn them out on the day, we know that works. 42% in an area where previously we got 14% with the same candidate just 1 year later. We know that the Maryport system works, but there's one important thing there. People have expressed a concern. If we're going to get all these new people registered, and especially get our supporters registered for postal votes, are we telling the opposition who our supporters are, so they can then target them with smear leaflets and all the rest? And the answer is obviously yes. No getting away from it. That is a fact. To an extent it doesn't matter, because our hardcore supporters, especially the ones who are present out of the political system, the very point, they're not going to take any notice of what's said about us by the left, by the Labour Party. They hate them anyway. But having said that, it is obvious that if people are going to get targeted with anti-BNP hate propaganda, it will have some effect. A hardcore, it increases their determination to vote for us. Some it frightens off. And that's a problem. And I think that this system of practical idealism and local ward help involving the community is the way absolutely to deal with that, because we're not just then asking people to give us their postal vote and hoping they'll remember us. We're going to be working to involve them in things, for instance, providing a Christmas party for pensioners, helping raise the money and things for it, helping get involved, inviting their neighbours, coming along themselves. And once they've taken part in that, once they see us doing it, it's very difficult for a group of outside spotty students and Islamists and Labour Party cranks to come in and say, oh, they're Nazis, when people know, well, they help us and no one else helps us, and you only come here at election times and tell us that down the road now. So there's that. But even more important than that, every person that we actually involve in, even if it's in some little way, if they're giving a quid or a tin of beans or some bric-a-brac for us to sell, or advising which of their neighbours we should invite or help, the moment they've done something like that, they're with us in this. The moment they're with us, if we're attacked, by outsiders especially, they're attacked as well. So I think that's really important. When an attack on us and our local team becomes an attack on the community, then that's when our electoral strategy is really going to start paying off.
The idea of a team keeps coming up in what you're saying. we only really need one candidate for each election, or do we actually need more?
Well, in most parts of the country, when you're talking district council seats, the core building block of local politics, there's 3 candidates per ward. Taking the county council ward in Maryport, that's made up of 3 district wards, so it's actually 9 councillors potentially at district level and a county councillor, so actually 10 people potentially we could look to get elected. Where do we get 10 good community leaders from? We haven't got them anywhere at present. We have to make them, and that's where this system, I think, feeds again into the elections by making them. One person can, in a district council ward, one person working a couple of hours a week door knocking to collect postal votes can win that ward in a year. That's definitely, it's just a matter of statistics, just figures. Time, 6, 7, 10 postal votes an hour. You do it so many hours, you've got it. So that can be done. But it's too much for one person, really. You need to have, if you've got one figurehead who people locally really know is good and does work, they need to have a team to help them and to be seen so they're not alone. It's not a one-man band. If they're sick or they go on holiday, someone else can pick up the pieces. So it does need to involve more than one person. In electoral terms, you need the voters really to know who they're going to vote for next time. So as it gets nearer an election, whoever out of the team is going to be standing in that area, it needs to be their name that the other team members put across. Oh, it's Fred, I'm working with Fred, he's really doing this. If a leaflet's going out, it needs to be Fred's photo on the leaflet with the rest of the team, because we want to build them up as well, and it's not an ego trip for anybody. So you need a team working, and then whenever the election's coming forward, the member of the team who's going to be standing is the one who's promoted. They're the one who get the higher profile at that point. But really you need a small team, and as we said before, I think that if 1 or 2 people start this, you'll get the small team. The best candidate we can stand in an area isn't in fact a hardcore politico from perhaps the other side of town. It's someone who's lived in that ward for 30 years and everyone knows them, went to school with them. They know they're good people anyway. Those are the kind of people we need to bring in and get into our team and give the profile.
So the potential electoral benefits are clear. This is actually a very exciting development. Is there any more to it than this?
Absolutely so, yeah. It's exciting if people do it. Some people are already doing it. Like I say, we've got to connect our good works to the ward, and we're away, we're doing it. And I'm sure that we'll experiment with different ways of doing it, keep on feeding it back, and in a few months' time, or perhaps a year or so's time, this is a long project, let's face it, because we're talking about working 1 or 2 wards, spreading out more and more. We want to do the whole country. If you had 3 people in every single ward, you could take power. It's as simple as that, because no one can match this when this really gets going. The combination of the Maryport style postal vote concentration and this, they feed into each other, they provide the people. No one can match it. If you do this in 12 wards, you can win a parliamentary seat. It's really as simple as that. So it is hugely exciting, and there is more to it than that. I think the most important added extra, maybe it's not at first sight obvious, it's a matter of security. If you think about the news, there's been a lot in the news recently about how different police forces, particularly the Metropolitan Police, but it's all over, have employed full-time agents provocateurs in various radical organisations in order to disrupt them. Now, the papers haven't talked about the fact that it's on record from the Metropolitan Police and so on, and from members of these units who've turned and said, well, actually it's wrong. They're on record as saying that they or their colleagues haven't just infiltrated anti-racist groups, weren't just trying to disrupt the Stephen Lawrence campaign and so on and smear the family. They also on record as saying they're involved in and disrupted the British National Party over years. That's not paranoia or wackiness, that's an absolute straight fact from coppers and ex-cops who've been involved in it. And when we've got a hierarchical structure, which most political parties have, the minute you get someone in who is an agent provocateur like that, or for that matter someone who's in, does a lot and then loses interest, or they might get married or whatever, or have marital problems, whatever it is, it takes them out of the game. When you've got a pyramid, the moment you've got someone at a certain level in it who's no longer playing our game, everything underneath them stops, cut off, dead. It's a disaster. And so we're very vulnerable to that, and whether it's by design or accident, it hurts us time and time and time again. So the beauty of this, it's a much flatter thing. It's a local people working in their own area to a mission order. Basically, they don't need any management, they don't need, if they want help, they can have it, but once they're rolling, they just do it. And whatever happens higher up the party simply doesn't matter. They're building our support where it counts amongst real people. And that, I think, makes it a really important thing. It limits all that potential damage. The whole thing, in a word, it's infiltration proof. And that's very, very important for a radical party like us.
So when you're talking about organising things like food banks, it could at first sight appear that this is a move away from radical politics. Mm-hmm. But in a very important way, this is actually a very revolutionary strategy, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely so. Yes, going in and helping people. You know, there's cranks out there who say, oh, you know, we're here to fight a war or whatever. We're here to get power, to do the things that need to be done, and helping ordinary people in their own areas, proving we're different, is, I think, an absolute key to that. So, yeah, it is revolutionary, even though it seems a very soft way of working, which is particularly good because how can the opposition attack it? How, in an extreme circumstance of serious economic or, for instance, ethnic violence problems, how can the state justify stopping or arresting people who are handing out food parcels to old age pensioners and getting the local community to rally around them and so on? It's a very, very powerful and is a revolutionary thing. It's more so than that because it's a very long-term strategy to take advantage of and do something about a problem which is only just beginning to strike in Britain, which is the shredding of the welfare state safety net. Part of that's sort of accidental in terms of cuts. You know, the bankers have bust the country, the politicians have let them, they're having to slash things, so they can't help but to abolish parts of the safety net. Part of it's absolutely deliberate. They're committed, as you know, to privatising everything, to turning everything into private profit centres in public service instead of public service. So there's an ideological bent as well, destroying the welfare safety net and the community cohesion of every community in the whole of Britain. And as that opens up gaps, either they won't be filled, or someone else will fill them, or we can fill them. Not filled means people suffer. Other people fill them means we don't get the benefit. We must aim to fill those gaps. That's very revolutionary. It's also, the minute you've got a group of people, it needn't even be a whole ward, the minute you've got 3 or 4 streets where people are in touch and working together and doing things and recognise 1 or 3 of our people as community leaders, you then got the foundation stone to do something more advanced, more ambitious than that. For years I've had people say to me on and off, well, we should get involved, for instance, in credit unions. Now, I think we probably should. You know, lots of left-wing groups do it, and there's lots of our kind of estates areas where it's not done. And being able to provide credit for local people at very low interest rates in a safe, secure way, rather than going to loan sharks, that's got great potential. But where the hell do you start? Because to be able to do it, you have to know who's good and who's bad in a community, who's a team player, who's going to take the money and run, and so on. You can't do it from scratch, it's very difficult. Whereas if you were, for instance, going to try and operate a project like that on top of the foundation stone of a ward self-help network, then it's a realistic thing. Other opportunities, community minibuses, for instance, to have minibuses to take pensioners out, kids to the seaside, people to the dole office when the bus queue's been cut, and so on like that. Not hugely expensive, but you have to raise money from the community to do it. It would be a wonderful thing, a network of those. Where do you start? Very difficult, but if people already trust you and are used to working with you on your local ward self-help team, again, it's an easy thing to do. Charity shops, community observation patrols, cooperatives, you know, people buying big bags of potatoes and onions or rice or whatever and splitting it up. All of those things, all of which actually the cooperatives especially, was absolutely crucial to the Labour parties, the patriotic Labour parties' drive to take an oppressed working class out of servitude and give them self-respect and organisation and political power. We're going back to those days. The first industrial revolution screwed ordinary people in Britain, and this post-industrial revolution globalist thing, it's screwing them as well. So we have to give these communities back this sense of identity and cohesion. That's what makes it revolutionary, and all sorts of things can be done if you've got the starting point of good constructive local actions at doorstep and at street level, actually helping people, and above all else, proving to people that we are different. We're not like the others. They're in it for themselves. We're in it for our people, for our community and our nation. That's the way forward.
This is a very exciting development, Nick.
Yes.
Thank you very much for sharing your thoughts and ideas with us.